Online conversation with writers, artists, and cultural warriors. Today, writer and teacher Nora Martin talks to Michele Corriel about her book, Montana Modernist. I hope I pronounced your name right, Michele.
Yes, you did a great job.
Okay, Corriel. I'm Phoebe Boucher, the managing editor of Raven Chronicles Press, a Seattle shoreline-based independent press and literary organization. First, we acknowledge that we live, work, and play on the unceded and traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples and that we occupy this land. This acknowledgement does not take the place of authentic relationships with indigenous communities who are very much still here, but it serves as a step in honoring the land we stand on and work on and as an act of resistance against the erasure of their histories. We'd like to thank the many co-sponsors of this and other Raven events this year, For Culture of King County and the new program King County Doors Open, and the City of Seattle's Office of Arts and Culture's CARE grant, for which we are immensely grateful for. Nora Martin is an author of fiction and nonfiction for both young readers and adults. Her novel, A Perfect Snow, was a 2003 PNBA Award winner. She's also the author of The Eagle's Shadow, The Stone Dancers, and Flight of the Fisherbird. She feels that all of the inspiration for her writing begins in landscape and the influence it has on our lives. She is an adjunct instructor at Montana State University and a retired school librarian. She lives in Bozeman, Montana, with her husband Andy and her two gorgeous cats. She is currently writing nonfiction for adults. Award-winning author, freelance art writer, and art curator, Michele Corriel earned her master's in art history and her Ph.D. in American art. She teaches at Montana State University and often lectures on Montana Modernism. Her distinguished book, The Montana Modernists, Shifting Perspectives on Western Art, was published by the Washington State University Press and earned 4 awards, including a national award from the Western History Association. The book is available in many, many places. For more information, we will have in the chat information about Michele and Nora. So I will hand it over to Nora.
Thank you, Phoebe. I want to welcome author and scholar Dr. Michele Corriel, who's here to talk about her important research and the book that Phoebe introduced. And I want to say that this book really showed an important gap that was missing in the historic record of Western art, and that it has really come to light in the work that she researched. So, Michele, you have such an extensive writing resume that in recent years has focused on Western art. And can you tell us how your writing and subsequent graduate studies evolved?
Well, I mean, I've always wanted to be a writer. And when I was in high school, I got the Penn Women of America Award for high school students. Big check for $10. And they had to call me and tell me to put it in the bank because I was just holding on to the check for so long. I messed up their bookkeeping. And then as I continued through my career, I started to realize um, how much I love to write about art because through art writing, I could use my poetry background. And I did have an extensive poetry background. I did a lot of workshops at the St. Mark's Poetry Project in New York City and throughout college and various workshops. But I also realized that it is very, very hard to make a living as a poet. Nobody pays you more than $10. Um, so I decided that the best way for me to use my poetry and still feel, like I'm doing what I love is to write about art. When I was in New York, I had a newspaper called Cover Arts New York, and we did art and music and dance and film and all that. But we also hired poets to write about art in the New York school tradition of hiring poets to write about art, such as Frank O'Hara and uh, John. Oh, his name just escaped me. But anyway, they used a lot of their poets to write about art so poets could make money and the writing could express the creative process by writing about the creative process. So when I write about art, I am able to use language in a way that feels like the art that I'm writing about, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
And I brought that idea to Montana, and nobody really was doing it here. So I became like the art writer. I mean, it's a very small pond, but I became the art writer for the state. And it's been great. I've met so many artists, and that's what kind of led me to the research that I did for Montana Modernists.
So tell us about the book. I mean, in every publication I ever pick up, you're in it. Accumulation is this book, which really it has shown the whole state and the whole region about the history of the evolution of the modern art in this era, and it's become so important. So tell us about this book and these artists.
Sure. So here's the book. Just I think it's back. You'll see it backwards, but um, it was culmination. It took me 5 years to write it. It has I Okay, so it starts out that as I was writing about all these artists in Montana, it seemed to always come back to the same 5 or 6 artists' name came up all the time. And these are the artists that are in the book. And it's Isabel Johnson, Bill Stockton, Francis Senska, Jesse Wilbur, Bob DeWeese, and Jenny DeWeese. And there were more modernists, but these are the main ones. And if I were to write about every artist in the state, it would become a survey book, and it wouldn't really be, a readable academic book that talks about the modernists and how they came here. So after World War II, before World War II, and after World War II, Montana was completely different. It just so happens that Montana has the highest percentage of people that sign up for the military. It always has. And they just have a more, percentage wise, they have a higher amount of people that joined. And so after World War II, the GI Bill came in, which allowed people that were in the services to get a free college education. It gave them money for a home, and it gave them a bit of a stipend as well for the first year. And because of that, a lot of people ended up who were in the military deciding to go back to school. And in this particular case, in the West, a lot of land grant universities had to start art schools because they didn't have any. They had only art departments that were basically part of the women's department, like, you know, cooking and bookkeeping and jewelry making and watercolors and things like that, that were just really meant for like farmers and ranchers' wives to have something to do. So when they started hiring all these um, artists to teach in their art departments, they were bringing in all these new big ideas that were out in the world. So the other thing that happened because of World War II is that uh, these artists needed a new vocabulary to talk about their experiences. It was no longer going to cut it just to do a landscape or a portrait. History paintings, things like that, religious paintings. It just wasn't what they were experiencing. So modernism was a really good tool for them to feel like they could express themselves. And so I picked these 6 artists. Oh, so I was looking around for a book about these artists because everybody was talking about them, and there was no books. There was nothing. All I found were like museum catalogs and people. I found a lot of people that were their students, and they were so generous with their time that they allowed me to talk to them about it. And as I come from not only a poetry background, but a journalism background, I was able to interview people, which isn't normal, for an academic book, but there were no resources, there were no secondary sources. So it was a lot of primary sources and interviews and catalogs from schools and things like that. So it really is the first book to come out on this movement. So I guess to talk about what is Montana modernism and how did it become a movement. In a lot of the states in the West, they had other schools and they had other communities that was full of artists, but not all of them became an art movement.
Mhm.
So the one in Montana became an art movement. I was able to figure out, this is just my own little brain working in its own little way, but I was able to come up with 3 things that really was the umbrella or the 3-footed stool that Montana modernism could stand upon. So one is place. Montana is a very big place with really interesting landscape, rivers and mountains and fields and dirt and animals. And, so landscape was big, place was big. And place isn't just landscape, but it's also how people feel about the place. Secondarily, it was the lineage of these modernists. When they came here or to Montana, they came with a very, very broad art education. So they had gone to school in all these places and studied all these people that were um, foundational in abstract expressionism. And they brought those ideas with them. And thirdly, is they were able to create a amazing sense of community. And Montana, as you might know, is a very big state. It's a huge state. I think somebody said the other day that it takes longer to get across Montana than it does to get from Montana to Texas. So if you think it's a big state. So when somebody had an art opening, one of the people in these communities, no matter the weather, no matter the time, they would get in their cars. They had really bad cars, very bad tires, very bad roads, and they would still get in there and go to all these openings so they could be there for each other. If it took 6 hours to drive there, 8 hours to drive there, they would still go because it was like they had to go to support each other because nobody else was going to support them. And they really didn't sell their work until they died, really, or were older in their careers. So they would trade or they would buy each other's works, and it became this really beautiful community. They would meet all the time, and it wasn't just artists, it was dancers and musicians, actors. Um, what am I leaving out? Whatever, all of the arts community. And they would be there. I'm sure you guys know the book Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. All heard of that. Well, Robert Persig stopped on his motorcycle trip across the country, stopped at the DeWeese's house, and they're in the book, they're in one of the chapters, just because it was such an incredible atmosphere. Everybody was so involved. They talked politics, they talked art, they would put on performances, they would make their own costumes, and it was just an incredible community. And whenever I teach this class, the students are always like, we want a community like that. And I'm like, do it, make it, be there for each other, and you will create that community. But these guys did it, all across the state, not just in one city. I thought maybe, did you have more questions for me, Nora? Or do you want
No,
me to?
I was hoping you would kind of go show us a little bit of each one, if you can, of these
Sure.
six
So
artists.
I will start with I'll start with the Isabel Johnson. She was the first one. I'm going to try to share my screen and bring up one of her pieces if I can.
And she was the printmaker.
She's
Oh,
an
no.
artist.
Yeah.
She had a ranch uh outside of Billings. Where did I put her stuff?
Oh, yeah, which is now Tippet Rise.
Which is now Tippet Rise. Here we go. Can you guys see that?
We see the whole screen.
All right. Let me try something else.
Yeah, I see your whole screen.
I know. I'm sorry. I'll get it. How about that? Is that better?
No, we still
No.
see the whole screen.
All right. Let me open this up again. How about that?
No.
I knew this was going to happen. I'm really sorry. Um, Good grief. How do I get it off of here onto there?
Does something happen when you check the check mark or undo it?
No,
Okay.
this is my whole screen, right? You could see my
Right,
Yeah.
desktop,
right.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. Where did it go? Isabel Johnson, here's one. Can you see that?
No. Oh,
Well,
no, that's Phoebe.
No, yeah.
all right, Nora, can you share your screen with what I sent you? I
Uh,
just can't seem to figure it out.
This has always been a problem, yeah.
yeah.
All right, I will
No, I'm
go
getting
old
that screen.
school. Let me get back here.
Well, we did at the beginning once.
I know. Let me stop the share. Okay. I will just hold up the pictures from the book and we'll see if that works.
Uh-oh.
It'll give you an idea if you put the speaker thing on. So this is Isabel Johnson's Fiddler.
We can see it.
Yeah,
And
in Red Willows here. You see
it's not
that?
backward
There we
here.
go.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, so that's Isabel Johnson. And she went to school in a million places. She couldn't stop going to school. Every time she would take a course, she first got her degree from U of M, University of Montana, in history in 1921. And like women were not getting university degrees back then.
Right.
And so she was able to teach a little bit, and then she would get enough money, and then she would go back to school. She went to Otis School in California, then she came back. Then she went to the Skowhegan, no, then she went to Columbia in New York and was studying history, and she happened on to an art class, and the professor there said, "Oh, you have to go to this new school they're starting in Maine called the Skowhegan Experimental School," which it's still going. It's up in Maine, and many famous artists go there. Um, and so she went up there and she really became started to become a painter. And she's like, maybe I should just move to New York and be a painter. And the professor told her, no, no, you have to go back to Montana. They need you there. So she went back to Montana and she taught at the university in Billings. And she realized that she still wasn't where she wanted to be. So she decided to go to Europe and see every single Cezanne painting that she could. And she spent a year in Europe just looking at Cezanne paintings. And I'm going to show you another piece in here that definitely reminds me of Cezanne. You see
Oh,
that?
yeah.
Yeah, good.
So so she like took this idea of outlining like the expressionists did. They would outline their things in black, and then so she started doing that. And Bill Stockton was a very good friend of hers. Here's a picture of her.
Okay.
Um, and she and Bill Stockton were in the eastern part of Montana, and she was a rancher also, and she loved her ranch. And she never got married. She just wanted to like go back to her ranch all the time if she wasn't teaching. So she painted a lot of ranch paintings and the landscape, and she hiked a lot. And, the land was just really, really important to her. And Bill Stockton lived about an hour north of her in Grass Range, which I just went to a couple of weeks ago, and it is a drive, and it's just a lot of there's trees there and hills. Um, it's a lot of scrub. There's but there's no like it's not like the western part of Montana with the big mountains and the pine trees. So Bill Stockton, here's another, I'll just give you one more, Isabel.
Mm.
If you know the artist Ted Waddell,
Hmm.
he was her student. And in this picture, you can see the similarities in style that he picked up from her. So the next person is Bill Stockton, who lived in Grass Range. He was brought up there. He's brought up on a ranch, and he was a curmudgeon. He was a troublemaker. He he had a cattle ranch that was his mother's, but when he took it over, he made it a sheep ranch. And if you know anything about ranchers, cattle ranchers and sheep ranchers don't mix.
Right.
So he did it just for spite. And, was never made a lot of money anyway. But so he started out in going around when he joined the army, he would travel the trains around the country and paint portraits of the Pullman porters so he could get the good food. And anyway, they finally said, okay, we're going to send you, because he was like good at math or something. So they said, we want you to go to Texas and study to be a refrigerator repairman, because they thought that we're going to really need that in the army. So it's World War II. And so they sent him to Texas. But when he got there, the teacher never showed up. So he never learned how to be a refrigerator repairman. They said, well, what can you do? He said, well, I could paint signs. So he started painting signs. So they shipped him off to France, and they put him to work in a hospital outside of Paris. And they had him painting signs in the hospital because, what else was he going to do? And it came the Battle of the Bulge, and the officer in charge of his group said, we need every able-bodied man to fight in the Battle of Bulge. We got to get out there. We're short on soldiers. And so he went to go, where do you want me? And they said, oh, no, 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 not you. They looked at his card and they said, you're a refrigerator repairman. You have to stay here at the hospital. So he didn't have to go to the Battle of the Bulge. His wife said he was the luckiest man in World War II, which is probably true. But anyway, then he met his wife in Paris. She was French, Elvia, and took her back to Montana to Grass Range, which is honestly in the middle of nowhere. And there it was a horrible winter. They had a small cabin on this ranch, and it was cold and it was miserable. She was so miserable, but she loved him so much. She was happy to stay there with him. And so he went to he used the money from the GI Bill to go to the Minneapolis School of Art. And he came back to Montana and he was really upset because they didn't teach him anything. So he went back to school in Paris and went to the Académie de Chaumier in Paris. And he still didn't feel like they were really teaching him anything. It's like they don't tell you what brushes to use. They don't, he was just kind of a mad guy anyway. And then finally I think it was in 1949, in Life magazine, they had an article about Jackson Pollock. And he read it and he said, huh, that's what I have to do. I have to paint the patterns and not the thing. So he's like, I don't need a big vista. I just want to paint like the land as I see it, as I know it. So I might be able to share the screen. We'll see. It's possible. I'll try for 1 minute. And if it doesn't work out, I won't do it. But I did have one of his pieces up.
Yeah, that's the one we successfully shared before.
Yeah.
I
Right.
know. We'll see what happens here. Can you see the share? Can you see that?
It's coming. It looks like it.
Okay, there
There.
we go.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So this is called Snow Formation, and it's one of his earlier pieces. And as you can see, there is a lot to it. And what he is painting is if you're in a blizzard and there's stuff there, but you can't see anything. You don't know what's up, what's down. You don't know which way to go, but you can see the beautiful colors that are in the painting.
Right.
And so this was the kind of stuff he was painting in the middle of Montana, in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it just boggles my mind to think about this guy and what he was thinking. And he used cattle markers, which even made him closer to the land because the cattle markers come in a lot of colors and they're really easy to use. And he could sit in his truck and, draw with his cattle markers. And eventually he used some oil sticks. But for most of his career, he used cattle markers, which is pretty cool. And he kept here's a picture of him.
Can I ask you, what is a cattle marker?
They used it to mark the ears on the cattle. It's like it's really greasy, like
okay.
crayon.
Okay.
And they use it to like put numbers on the cattle, the little ear mark things they hang, and they put numbers and stuff like that on them. And so he had a lot of them around, so he used them. I have tons of stories about him, but I don't want to take up all your time talking about Bill Stockton. I made that mistake last time. Here's another piece that he did called Dusk. This is the land where Charlie Russell was king. He was painting native scenes, the noble savage and, horseback and killing elk. And, it was just like, it wasn't the way that life was after World War II in Montana. I mean, they had electricity, they had running water, they had cars. And if you just looked at Charlie Russell paintings, you would think they didn't. So Bill Stockton and Isabel Johnson were on the east side of the state, and they were good friends with each other. and they would often share work. And Bill said that after Isabel got back from Europe, after studying Cezanne, that her work changed completely, and she became a much better painter. And Bill Stockton would get in his truck and drive. Oh, here's one of his sculptures he did. This is done with nails that he found on the ranch that he welded together. And this is Saul on the road to Damascus. So, I mean, you could just, he was such an amazing artist. And to think that he was working in such isolation, speaking of which, he would get up in through the middle of the night, or whenever he just whenever it struck him, get in his truck and drive to Bozeman and knock on the Deweese's door at like 2 in the morning and just come in with a bunch of paintings and say, "What do you think of this? What do you think of that?" And they would get up and they would talk about it and open a bottle of scotch, and then off they would go all night talking about art. And that's just how they were. That was the community they had, and it was perfectly fine. So the next two artists, I did this book in sections, and I kind of put the artists together with each of the main ideas of modernism. So the first two are in the section called place. Although all the artists have place in their work, those two are the most connected to the land. So I put them together. The next two are Jessie Wilbur and Frances Senska. So Jessie Wilbur was a printmaker for the most part. She also painted, but she was primarily a printmaker. And she used a lot of woodblock prints. And let's see, where did I miss her? Here's some of her work. This one is called Birds and Trees. And this one is called Cats in a Garden, which is one of my very favorite ones. And Frances and Jessie ended up becoming the very best of friends. They bought a house together, or they built the house together. And they hung out together, they traveled together. They were just basically inseparable. And a lot of their work, you'll see there's a bit of an influence on each other, but they all had influence on each other. So, take from it as you wish. But they had cats, and they had gardens, and they had trees, and they had birds, and they just loved all of that. And one of the thing about modernists is that modernists, the difference, as Clement Greenberg said, is that modernism is about the personal. Whereas before that, a lot of the art was historical art or church allegories or things like that. Modernism was able to bring in the everyday into the art and make it important. And then after that is, here's one more by Jessie. This puts together the idea of community for me. This was done in 3 wood blocks. It's very large, and she used picnic tablecloth, the picnic tablecloth. And that's what they did. They used whatever they could. And it wasn't about being archival. It was about making art and making as much and as they make it as well as they could. So that was very important to them. In one of the prints that Jessie made, it's magpies in a snowstorm. And she used 21 shades of white for that print, which is pretty amazing to me. So Frances Senska was born in Cameroon, Africa. Her parents were missionaries, and she was a fighter pilot in World War II. She trained on a fighter jet, but she never got to fly in the war. So they just had her, on standby. But she went back to school afterwards, and took as many ceramic courses as she could. And she brought ceramics to Montana. There really was only one other person doing ceramics at the time. And she brought all of her African experience with her and all of her extra classes with her. And she really became like the mother of ceramics in Montana and helped found the Archie Bray Foundation, which is a very big clay center in Montana. And some of her work is this is called the Yababo pot.
Wow.
And Yababo means there will be 9 in Cameroonian, and 9 is a very lucky number. And she would make these individually for people and put on it the things that they loved. And she also was very famous for her partridges, these little birds. Gotta find them in here. I didn't know I'd be doing this. Oh well. Um, I have some downstairs. I don't want to go get it. But anyway, they're little, here's a chicken and wine set that she did that was indicative of her ability to look at things in terms of something else. So she used the idea of a chicken to make a wine set, and all the little cups are little chicks that group together, and she always made 9 cups. And there was just a big show in Bozeman of her work, and they had collected all of her chicken and wine sets and all of her little partridges that she made. It was pretty cool. And then, so one other thing about a lot of these modernists were they were all teachers. So they were able to really pass on their knowledge to the students. And a lot of those students became teachers. And it created this sort of generational Montana modernism that was able to flower around the state. So the last 2 artists that I'm going to talk about are Bob and Jenny DeWeese. And the great thing about Bob and Jenny were they felt that they had to make art also. They were just art, art, art all the time. So they met at Ohio State University, and they were separated during the war. Jenny taught the soldiers that came home with, they called it shell shock back then. It was PTSD. And she worked with them as an occupational therapist, helping them to do art. And Bob was in the Army, and he was stationed in Hawaii. And the family was so generous to me that they let me read the letters that they sent back and forth to each other. And they had a whole pile of them, and they let me read them before even the family read them. So that was such a great honor. And, you would think, being separated by war and, you're in thousands and thousands of miles away, that the letters would be like, I miss you so much. I can't wait to see you again. Can't wait to hold you or whatever. And they, instead, their letters were, art, 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 art. I gotta make art. What am I doing here? Maybe I shouldn't even be an artist. Maybe I should be a writer. Maybe I should be a musician. And it was like all this like searching for their voices. And Jenny would write ARART exclamation point, exclamation point. It was like you could just hear her just going crazy. And how much they wanted their own studios, and what were they doing in the, what is this war doing to art? And it was just everything. So they loved art so much. It was their life. And they really weren't that romantic to start with, although they had 5 kids. So there must have been a little romance in there. But when they came back, Bob got a couple of teaching jobs, and Jenny went with him. And finally, they came to Montana State College in 1949. And Bob was a legendary teacher. The students loved him. He was tough, but he would really get them to learn how to see, not just how to draw. And it was very interesting. They both had this teacher called um, Hoyt Sherman, who had a flash lab at the University of Ohio State University, sorry. And what he would do, and Roy Lichtenstein was also one of his students. And what he would do is he put everybody in this classroom and in the dark and put an image up on a screen, flash it for a second, and then make them draw what they had seen. And it was like only up there for a few seconds. And I usually do this with my classes when I have them, and I have them do it, and they actually love it. But it teaches you to see something as a whole unit, and not just like this line goes like this, that line goes like that. You see something as a whole object, and then you have to incorporate that through your lenses, and then draw it. And the modernists, especially Cezanne, was very, very, very interested in how the eye sees. The eye actually sees upside down, and the brain turns it around, and how perception worked, and how you could paint something three-dimensional on a two-dimensional surface. And they were very interested, and they were talking to psychologists, they were talking to eye doctors, they were talking to like lens makers in cameras and film, and they were just very interested in all that. So this is one of Bob's painting. It's called Western Painting. And this is his idea of a Western painting. So it's just like a cartoon of the animals that every single person paints in the West, the buffalo, the range, the fences, all that stuff. And he was just so anti Charlie Russell. And he was like, if you want to paint a realistic painting, just cut a hole in your wall in your house, and then you could look outside and see a realistic view. But here's one of his pieces that's very much like the Flash Lab. That's his daughter doing Tai Chi. And he always walked around with a pad in his pocket or a bunch of like index cards, and he was always sketching. Any party they would go to, a car ride. Here's a car ride that he took right outside of Bozeman is Logan, and that's like the train that goes by. He was just always drawing. This is, to me, he did collage. He was always experimenting with the brush strokes, and all throughout his life, he was just so searching for, art, no matter where he was. A really great teacher. And then Jenny, here's a couple of pieces that I found when I was scrounging around in Jenny's old studio. So this is Bob's work. And he did this in 1960, which is pretty, progressive. It's pieces of paper, it's paint, it's all kinds of stuff. All right, so the last one is Jenny DeWeese. She also started out with non-objective painting, which is that. And she also went to Ohio State University, the Ohio State University, but she also went to Hoyt Sherman's flash lab and learned how to see. And they lived up in this canyon, and she would paint what she saw outside her window a lot. And these are some of the pieces that she did.
Hmm.
And she said that even if she turned it upside down, it would be a non-objective painting. So even though she was painting, you know, real things, she was really looking at the patterns and looking at the lines, looking at the color. And she used oil sticks. She started using the cattle markers because she saw Bill's cattle markers, and she was like, "Oh, I want to try that." But then she had a grad student living in a yurt on her property who was using oil sticks, and so she started using the oil sticks, and she loved it. And her pieces are very um, lively. And she was very much a proponent for women in the arts. And so she was on the national board for women artists in DC. And she was always promoting women. And of all the six, she's the only one that I actually met. She was older, and I would go over there, and I would leave there with a legal pad filled with names of young artists that she wanted me to write about. So it was, oh, she was always promoting other artists and just always looking out for other artists. And here's a picture of Jenny, and in the middle is Leela Audio, and at the end, this is Leela Audio, Francis, Leela Audio, and Jenny DeWeese.
Mhm.
And this is at Bob and Jenny's son's wedding at the Archie Bray. So I guess they all knew each other. They all loved each other. They all learned from each other. They all hung out together. And I think the community really made the movement something as opposed to just another thing, which a lot of communities had. So I have now talked for many long minutes. I'm sure you are sick of hearing me, but I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. Thank you. I think it is time for questions.
Everybody's muted. Everybody can unmute themselves if they want to.
I do want to add that one of the things that makes this book also so beautiful is Michelle's lyrical writing. Anyone can sit down and read the book cover to cover, and it reads so beautifully,
Thank you.
and it's a delight.
I wanted it to be a book that regular people could read it. I didn't
Yes,
want
and
it to be an academic book.
right.
I wanted it to be accessible. And I got a lot of crap for that from my committee.
I'm glad.
Does anybody have questions? They can unmute because everybody's muted right now. No?
If you're shy, you can put it in the chat.
Anybody have a question? Oh.
Well, if you don't,
Wonderful stories. Thank you.
Yes.
I do have a question because you also work with students, art students at Montana State, and you've kind of expanded on the art and are working with them in workshop situations to create artist statements. So could you speak to that a little bit and how it relates, how it builds a bridge between art and writing?
Oh, sure. So I love working with artists. And I know that they're not very good writing. I mean, some of them are, and that's great, but some of them are just not, it just doesn't come to them because they concentrate on art, which, is as it should be. But it's also good to let art students know that words are also a tool they can use. Oh, somebody said, what happened to the French wife? She stayed in Montana, Elvia, and she became a wonderful wife and mother. And yeah, she ended up coming back to Montana and staying for the rest of her life there. So she did an oral history, if anybody's interested in what it was like to live in the middle of Montana in the 50s. It's at the Historical Society, but you can download it and listen to her. It's really interesting. But anyway, so when I teach artists how to write an artist statement, I like them to think of it as a way, another tool in their toolbox, in their a palette, a color in their palette, to use words in a way that is not just to get your point across, but to get people to feel the point, get them to understand your work in a deep way, which can easily be done with words. That's how we communicate. And so I usually have them start out with a line poem, and then I have them think of their work and maybe their workspace and try to explain it in detail to be very specific. And then from there, we work out, what they're trying to say. But I am actually doing one next week.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm working with the graduate students.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Okay. Looks like there's no other questions. Good stories. I can't imagine living in places that some of these artists did when they came back, after the war and
No, especially Bill Stockton. I've
Wow.
been in that area. There's not much there.
It's outside of Lewistown.
Ugh,
And it's just, yeah, it's unimaginable.
no.
But it was a land that they loved, and they were both he and Isabel, there's nothing they loved more than being on their ranches.
Yeah.
And when I went up to visit him, Bill Stockton kept all of his he called them keepers, the good ones, the good pieces of his paintings. He dug a hole in the ground and he had a metal, like almost a coffin put in,
Hmm.
a steel coffin. So he put his paintings in there, closed the lid and locked it, because he was afraid a fire would come and would destroy his paintings.
Wow.
And when one of our great Montana philanthropists saw it, Miriam Sample, she was horrified, and she bought all the paintings. There's like 72 paintings in there, and just donated it to museum and told them to distribute the money yearly. It was like $70,000 or something, to
Wow.
deliver it slowly so they didn't spend it all at once. And then Isabel, when she was working, she was about 70, and somebody from one of the big museums came to see her work, and they wanted to buy her work for their, acquire it for their museum. And he asked her, what is it like to be an artist in Montana? And she said, well, I don't know, because I'm really still trying to be an artist. They were all, just really humble and interesting and thoughtful and very generous with their time and with their work.
Well, thanks. We all look forward to reading. I've got the book. I've read several chapters, and when I have time, slowly read a little bit at a time. I don't think is there any more questions? Otherwise, we want to thank you, Michele,
Oh, thank you.
Nora.
Michele.
No
And
cats. We didn't
thank
get to see it.
Nora, and I thank Phoebe, and I thank all of you for showing up.
Yes,
Yeah, it was wonderful. Thank you so much.
thank you.
Well, I didn't get to see anybody's cats, but that's what
Oh,
They're on the couch.
He's still sleeping, so
Okay, yeah,
my
well,
little orange cat.
yeah, that's until we get a cat, I'm gonna have to think
Live vicariously.
variously. Yeah. Well,
I don't
goodbye,
think-
everybody. Thanks for showing up.
Okay.
Night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.